I've got a question from Tom. Hi Mike, I would love to develop a unique style. Does this come purely by finishing a lot of music, or are more conscious steps also needed to be made? Thanks, Tom. And the short answer to this question is, if you're not already making unique music as a default, then it is highly unlikely you'll automatically end up making it simply by finishing a lot of music. Finishing a lot of music is absolutely an ingredient in making unique music. There's no way of making unique music without finishing a lot of music. But I would argue that those artists who straight out of the gate make unique music, they have certain unconscious conditions in place, which means that that's just what they do. And these artists are few and far between. For everybody else, and I would say this is the vast majority of people, I'm including myself in the vast majority of people here, if you don't automatically do it by finishing a lot of music, then you have to be conscious about it. And this is because it's not as simple as taking conscious steps. In our culture, we massively over-index on the power of the conscious mind. Conscious thinking is incredibly powerful, but it doesn't account for as many decisions as we think it does, as many things that happen as we think it does. So my approach is to bring in the unconscious and the emergent as well. If I can cast your mind back to the little model of how to make unique music, and I'll put a link in the show notes to a playlist where there will be all of the episodes in this unique music series that I'm talking about, where I talk about the three different stages of making unique music. There's vision, play, and then synthesis. So vision is where we have a conscious idea of what we want to do. And then in play, using that conscious idea of what we want to do, other things happen. And many of those things happen because we're unconsciously doing things. Not all of them, some of them just happen by accident. But at least some of what happens in our music sessions are as a result of us having unconscious motivations and desires and ideas that we are not aware of. And then out of that mixture of going in a particular conscious direction and other things happening emerges our unique style, which is why I've noticed time and again that people who do develop a unique style are quite surprised by what it is they find themselves making. It certainly happened in my music, where what I'm making, I know it is what I want to make, but only after I've made it. In the course of making it, I think I'm going in a different direction and something else emerges. So how I think about almost everything in my life and in my music is that the conscious mind is there to create unconscious conditions where what I want to happen emerges. Instead of putting my conscious thought, my conscious ability to make decisions and achieve goals as being the all-powerful tyrant that directs the entire process. The conscious mind is part of a system. It's a tool that we use to move through the process. This is why when you're in flow, it can often feel like you're not directing the process, you are a part of it, you're a participant in it. It's almost like you're observing what is happening. This is because a healthy creative process is a combination of conscious direction, unconscious play, and what emerges. So if you're not already making unique music, then the reason I say it's highly unlikely that you will without some conscious steps that need to be taken is because you want to ask yourself, well, what are at the moment the unconscious conditions around my music and in my process? And are those unconscious conditions leading me to the result of unique music? So I'm just going to give you some examples which may well be true of where you're at. So we're in a situation now where there is almost any information that you require to make music is available to you. So there's an enormous amount of video, tutorials, content out there which are teaching you best practices, and this is how we do this. Okay, and that is going to be pulling you towards, all right, this is how I'm supposed to do that. This is how I'm supposed to do the other. Now, my mum always used to say, Mike, what you need to do is learn the rules so that you can break them. That is good to a certain extent, but the trouble is with learning simply the rules is that they can become a prison. It's almost like you get trapped by the rules. The act of learning them makes it much harder to break them. Because going back to the previous Mailbag episode, learning best practices and learning the right, in scare quotes, heavily scare quotes there, the right way to do things is an extremely certainty creating situation. That certainty is an unconscious condition. Yeah, an unconscious condition of learning best practices and the right way to do things is that it makes you feel certain. An unconscious condition of making unique music is that it makes you feel uncertain. So I'm not necessarily saying that making unique music means breaking all of the rules and not following any best practices. It's absolutely not what I'm saying, but I'm simply saying that by following certainty, by following what we desperately want, the unconscious condition of wanting certainty, we are likely to be learning rules which then become much harder to break. My theory is that the reason that there's such an enormous amount of extremely well-produced generic music out there at the moment is because of this, what I'm talking about right now, because of all the freely available information, which is meaning that lots of people are in a race to the bottom, if you like, where they're just focusing on how to do the best practices the best. In a sense, best practice is the worst practice. So that's one condition around music making that makes it unlikely, unless you're already doing it, for you to make unique music. Another is we are always connected with the internet and social media. We're always able to see what other people are doing and what is working for other people. Again, there's something that exists. There's something that makes me feel more certain. So I'm going to copy that. I'm going to do that. So by having all of these examples of things that are working for other people, we're likely, just as human beings, to try and emulate those people. And in so doing, not go in our own direction. Now, it's not that we can't be influenced and inspired by other people. In fact, that is a necessary thing that we need to do in order to make something new. Unique music isn't an island. Your unique music is essentially you putting things together which already exist, but from here and there and the other place together, which haven't been put together in that way before, and thereby making something unique. It's not completely original, the like of which you've never heard before. It's this influence from here and that influence from there. But the problem with social media and being always connected is that we're constantly being shown the finished product, the entire thing. And it becomes difficult to actually zero in on a small part of that rather than just try and reproduce the whole. And related to this is that because we have almost all recorded music available to us at the click of a button right now, it becomes very difficult when we're in the process of making unique music not to compare negatively so that we end up going in a non-unique direction, not to compare something that's finished to something that's very much in development. Again, if we go back to this unconscious condition of certainty versus uncertainty, you're listening to something on Spotify that has been highly produced and completely finished and sounds absolutely great. And then you go into the studio and you're making music, you're doing experiments which not only are unfinished, so they're not produced well at this point, you're also doing things that might not work. So you have to take conscious steps to create the unconscious conditions to move forward in this extreme uncertainty. So I'll give you some examples of the kind of steps that you need to take. When you're running music sessions, particularly towards the start of the process, what you want to do is create specific rules and limitations for those music sessions. It's almost like you want to think about the idea creation phase, the first half of the process, as you setting up certain musical experiments. And then when you're actually in the process of making music, it's like you're simply running the tests. You're not focusing on quality. You're just seeing what happens. You're not trying to get to, when you're actually doing it, an end result. So you set up the rules and limitations to say, oh, well, I wonder what happens when I put these things together. When I put these sounds together, these ideas together, this influence from here and that influence from there and the other influence from over here. What happens if I put those together? And then you run a number of musical experiments, not worrying about what it's actually sounding like. Export them, leave them aside for a few days, and then come back and listen to them and go, okay, here's what's working and here's what's not working. And then you design another musical experiment. Now, obviously, splurging works brilliantly for this kind of process. And of course, you're not, when I say you put them aside for a few days, you're not doing nothing in that time. You're running other musical experiments. Okay, so you are essentially creating lots of opportunities for yourself. And in doing this, I mean, you have to increase the amount of music that you're making, the number of ideas you're making, because the majority of them aren't going to work. And you've got to be able to let go of quality in every single moment. So if you've practiced splurging, you have actually taken some of the conscious steps to create the conditions where you can do this, because it's all too easy to get deflated and overwhelmed with the majority of things that you're doing not working. I do think it's fair to say that if you want to make high quality, unique music, then you have to be okay with making crap. It's like you're digging through the dirt to find those diamonds. And when you're making unique music, those diamonds are even rarer than when you're not. Then also, of course, given that you're having to listen to those musical experiments for the opportunities, you're going to have to develop ways of listening, take an approach to listening to your music, which involves focusing on smaller elements in the music, not the whole. So rather than hearing an idea that you made as a whole and going, well, that's crap, instead of listening like that, you go, what is good in this? What is working in this? So you're listening in a finer way. And you've got to be able to develop the ability to hear past the overall crapness to notice those opportunities. So that's quite an analytical way of listening. But at the same time, you need to be able to step back and simply listen as well. So there's a certain amount of practicing how to listen, different ways of listening, that's going to be required as well. Also, understanding that many different ways in a piece of music that you can make it unique. Because a lot of people, particularly if we're talking about instrumental electronic music, a lot of people, what they see as uniqueness simply comes from sound design. Right? That's the only way to be unique. It's one of 12 different, probably more than that, but I can divide it into 12 different elements of style which you can develop your uniqueness with. There's a type of melody, there's a type of bass line, there's a type of rhythm, there's so many different elements, the way that you use lyrics, there's so many different elements to make unique music outside of sound design. Of course, sound design can come into it, and one of the things that makes you unique could be how you use sound. It's certainly something that I'm developing in my music, but recognizing all of the different sonic signposts, the different things that can go into your unique music is something else that you want to take a look at. But most of all, what you really need to be able to do is create the conditions around you where you feel certain, so that you can be uncertain about the music that you're making. And I shared a lot of these in the last podcast episode, so listen to that. There's a link in the show notes to the playlist. But essentially, things like working on a specific project with a specific deadline, working with other people, all of the stuff I shared in that episode about focusing on things that make you feel more certain will again be creating the unconscious conditions where you can work through this uncertainty. And bear in mind, while this might sound difficult, while it might sound challenging, it's incredibly fun, particularly when you understand what the conditions are to create the process for making unique music. If you understand the process of making unique music, how it actually works, then it's incredibly fun to work with uncertainty, because it's challenging. I mean, I don't do this because it's easy. I do it because it's hard. And by understanding the process of unique music, which is what I'm attempting to do over these podcast episodes, it will also shorten the amount of time it takes. I mean, I guess theoretically, if you made music, a bunch of music for 100 years, you would automatically make unique music. But we don't want to take 100 years, right? We want to be much quicker than that. Maybe you want to take 100 days. And if you're interested in finishing an album and in so doing, making unique music, then the next group of Make an Album with Mike, which is the first one where I'm designing a new program which will help you develop your unique style at the same time as making an album. I'm calling it Make a Unique Album with Mike. That's starting very soon. So if you're interested in finding out about that, send me an email, mike@makemusicyourlife.com, and I'll send you all the details. And with all that said, onwards and upwards.